G'day YouTubers. I thought this was going to be the last video in the series, just like I thought the last video was going to be the last video in the series, but as it turns out I've had some requests to put some more information in. There's some more information I wanted to put in. Some of the information that I was asked to put in this series I've thought about and I'm going to put in a separate video. It's certainly worth doing a video on them, but it just doesn't quite fit into this series, so I'm going to do that in a separate video. I certainly will get it done. But in the meantime, I'm going to cover a few bits in this episode. It's a little bit different to previous episodes. I'm going to give you some spots in this episode, some general areas, and I'm going to sort of start working into looking for areas that no one else knows about for yourselves. I don't know that there's any of them in Moreton Bay, to be honest. I think someone knows about every single area there is to fish in Moreton Bay. But you never know, you might just find somewhere new or somewhere that not many people know about. Anyway, let's get on with this episode. I talked about a spoil ground that's just out from Raby Bay a few videos back. I have fished that fairly recently and yeah, you can pull up some smallish ones, few keepers. But there's another couple of spoil grounds in the bay we'll just touch upon now. Back in the day they used to dump all sorts of rubbish in these spoil grounds. These days they tend just to dump the tailings from dredging. I did hear a few years back they were dumping that around Mud Island, so I imagine it went into one of these spoil grounds. So there might be some new structure down there if there was any rocks amongst it. I don't know which one of the grounds they dumped that into, and when they were doing the dumping there wouldn't have been any fish around because the water would have been all stirred up. I don't think the fish would have liked that very much at all. But that was a year or two ago and it will have settled down by now and the fish will have moved back in. First one we'll look at is this circular area that's southeast of Mud Island. I've got a couple of marks in the spoil ground here. I can't for the life of me remember where I got them from. I would have said that I hadn't fished this spoil ground since I've had a GPS. Wherever they came from, the marks are there, so if you're going past, you might want to stop and just have a sound around and see what you think. If I could remember where I got the marks from, I might be able to say whether it would be worth your while to stop, but I'm sorry I can't, so you'll just have to stop and try it for yourself. This other spoil ground to the west of Mud Island is much larger. I don't recall having ever fished this. At least I didn't know it was a spoil ground if I did fish it. So I'm just putting the mark in for it. It will be on your GPS maps. If you haven't got a GPS on your boat, you can use the phone app. The Navionics phone app has it marked. That should get you onto the spot. Have a sound around and see what you can find. I suspect that this would be the spoil ground that they've been dumping the latest dredgings in. When they dredged out the car ferry terminal down near Cleveland, they dumped the tailings up near Mud Island and I suspect that they would have dumped them in this spoil ground. That was a year or two ago, I think. It's hard to remember, but I think it was a while back, so it would have all settled by now. If there's any rocks amongst it, there's some more new spoil down there. Maybe some fish to go with it. This is just a general overview of the positions of the artificial reefs in the Central Bay. It's a benefit to those that are new to the area and don't get the relative positioning of them. There's the Coochie Artificial Reef, the West Peel Artificial Reef and the Harry Atkinson's Artificial Reef. They're roughly equidistant apart, and depending on which one you're going to, you'll pick your launching point. For instance, launch from Victoria Point to go to the East Coochie Artificial Reef. I'd launch from the Raby Bay ramps to go to West Peel. And I would probably launch from Manly to go to the Harry Atkinson Reef if I was looking for a closer ramp, mainly because I'm not that keen on the Port of Brisbane ramp and I certainly don't like the Wellington Point ramp. I've done some reviews on some of the local ramps. I'll put a link to that in the video description. If you're not familiar with them, it might help you pick which one you'd like to launch from. There's an area east of Green that's marked on most of the maps of Moreton Bay as a deep trench. That is intended as a warning to trawlers to be careful when they're trawling through that area so they don't get their net snagged where the bottom changes depth rapidly. If they get the net snagged, obviously it's going to tear and worse still it may capsize the trawler. However, that's not the only area of the Central Bay that the depth changes rapidly. There's quite a lot of ledges around the central bay where it's worth having a look at to see if there's any fish holding. I'm going to show you 3 or 4 of them, talk about them a little bit, and I do want to show you how to find them on a map of the seafloor. But I don't want to overrun this video, so if I run out of time in this video before I've got to that point, I will make a special video showing you how to find them, and I'll put that up in the very near future. In the meantime, let's have a look at the ones that I've marked on this map. Looking at the deep trench first, these are some marks that are along that trench. They may not be perfectly accurate because I've taken these marks off a map rather than a GPS, but if you zigzag along them a little bit, you should be able to find the trench and follow it. Personally, I've only fished the very northern end of the trench. From snags that I've had and stuff that I've pulled up, I reckon that the bottom has a fair bit of soft coral on it. Caught some fish there. From memory, they were keepers, but nothing huge. There were some throwbacks. Having a good fossick along the trench itself might turn up some better spots than right at the northern end. I do see boats in that general area fishing fairly often, so one would assume it's not too bad a spot, though there's not too many of them, usually just 1 or 2, but at least someone keeps going back there. Just to the south of the deep trench there's another trench. It's not as deep and it's a lot wider, so the sides aren't as steep, but I have seen boats there fishing from time to time. I've never fished this one. I have found it on the map, and just putting 2 and 2 together, I realised that this is an area where I have seen the boats. They may not have been quite on the trench, but they're in this general area. And given the topology of the bottom there, I reckon that the only place worth fishing is in that trench on the drop-offs either side of it. It's about half a kilometre wide from shallow to shallow, so they're not steep drop-offs. But I have seen bait there in that drop-off as I've been going through with the sounder on. And wherever there's bait, there's likely to be fish, so it's probably worth having a look at. This is getting more into the area of how to find your own spots rather than spots that actually produce, just to be clear on it. As I said earlier, if I have time in this video, I'll show you how to find them. If not, I'll do another video showing you how to find them. This one to the east of Mud Island is more of a drop-off than a trench. I just found it on the map and marked it along. Again, the GPS coordinates might not be accurate because they're taken off a map. They're not something that I've plotted off my GPS. What is interesting about it though is that plotting this on the map happens to go through one of the spots that I have fished. So I guess that goes to show that you can find spots on your map and they do produce. The spot that I've fished along this line is closer to the northern end of it. But looking at the seafloor, I reckon anywhere along that line's worth looking at. Again, as I've always said, if you can't see the fish on your sounder, it's not there. There's no use dropping a line down hoping you're going to catch it. You've got to see it on your sounder first. You know it's there, drop your line in and haul it on up. But checking along these marks, looks like it might be worth a shot. I wouldn't drive straight along the marks, I'd just use the marks as a guide and sort of zigzag along, checking out what's on the bottom. As anyone that's been out to Harry's on a weekend knows, it can be very crowded, a bit like a car park actually. And while I have limited experience fishing the artificial reefs, I pulled a couple of good fish out of there, but I'm certainly not as good as some of the blokes that regularly pull good fish out of the artificial reefs. But my limited experience tells me that if it's crowded, forget it. I've never done well on the artificial reefs when it's been crowded, but I have done alright when it's been really quiet during midweek times. However, looking at the map, there's a lot of drop-offs just north of Harry's, and I have seen boats fishing out there when it's been a bit crowded on Harry's. There's also drop-offs to the south of Harry's too, but for now I'm just going to concentrate on these ones to the north. I'll mark a couple of them on the map here. I haven't fished them, but again, this is showing you where you could look to see if you can find your own fishing spots. I think this video is going a bit long, so I probably won't get to show you how to find them on the map in this video, but I will put another one up very soon showing you how I do that. And just a reminder again, these marks have been taken off a map. There's no point just following them blindly. Zigzag around that general area and see what you can find on your sounder. If you can see the fish, drop a line down and see if you can catch it. I was planning to save these next few sections for the final video, but the other thing that I wanted to put in the videos before I finish this series is going to make this video too long, so I'm going to run with these pieces now that we're going to finish up the series, and I'm going to do another video showing you how to look for likely areas to fish on the bottom so that you can go out and search for some of your own fishing spots that maybe no one else has found yet. The idea of this series of slides is to put everything in perspective for you around the central part of the bay. We're going to start off with the green zones that you need to avoid. This is the three artificial reefs here. The Coochie one's a little bit obscured by the name of the island, but the West Peel and the Harry Atkinson's reef you can see clearly, and there was a shot of the three artificial reef areas earlier. This next one, the blue area, is roughly the area that I generally troll. That's not saying you won't find mackerel outside that area, you certainly will, and I have caught them outside that area, but that's the general area that I usually look to troll. There's certainly mackerels to the north and south of it, I just don't see as many. So over north of the Lazaret, over to the leads out of Wellington Point, up to the beacon to the south of Green, and then up to just shy of the green zone on St Helena, and back over past the Hope Bank to that beacon on the end of the chain banks. And out of that area, most of the mackerel I pick up around the Lazaret or the Hope Banks. You get a few outside that area, depending on how thick they are. If they're thick, you'll get them anywhere through there. But if they're a bit scarce, I generally find the Lazaret and the Hope Banks are the best. This slide is just an overview of all the marks that we've talked about in this series of videos. And the same again, but this time I've removed all the beacons from the slide just to make it a little bit clearer what we're looking at. And this other set of slides is much the same thing. We're going to look at general areas for fishing and look at them in relation to all the green zones that are around. I'd really hate to see you contribute to the government coffers unnecessarily. In that previous set of slides I showed you the area of the paddock that I generally troll in, but you'll find pelagic species anywhere through the paddock. You'll pick up tuna, mackerel, which is what I generally target. I haven't caught them, but I've heard of cobia and wahoo being caught in the area, but I've never seen it myself. But as you can see, it's a huge area, and because it's a huge area, it can turn rough very quickly, so if you're out there, just be aware of the weather. I harp on that a lot, but Moreton Bay can be very dangerous. The Rainbow Channel's another good area for pelagics, and although I haven't marked it, don't forget the Rouse Channel. That's also very good, particularly for mackerel. Whiting and squid can be had all through the Small Ships Channel, in Fisherman's Gutter, and also up around Days Gutter, Browns Gutter area, and of course up in the Blue Hole. They're all really good areas for whiting and squid for most of the year for the whiting, either diver whiting or summer whiting. There's lots of places to catch crabs in the bay, not just the areas that I've marked here, but the main ones I generally use are southwest of the Amity Banks, north side of Mud Island, and my favourite, mainly because it's close to where I launch, is anywhere from the leads at Wellington Point down past Cleveland Point. And although I haven't crabbed there for a while, I could always rely on getting some around Goat and Bird Island as well, just on the western side of them. And this is another look at all the marks that we've talked about in this series in relation to the green zones. As I said before, I don't want you contributing to the government coffers unnecessarily, so some of these marks are quite close to green zones. I'd like you to be aware of that. Earlier in this series I was making a point of putting in travel distances and times from the various ramps to the areas that I was talking about. In the last few videos I haven't put that in because the videos were getting fairly long and I didn't want to make them overly long, so just in this one, just very quickly, I'm going to run through all of the ones that haven't been spoken about. You can pause it if you want to see them or just skip over it. Well, that's it for another video. Thanks for taking the time to watch it, and I hope you did get something out of it. I know it's a little bit different to the videos I've been doing on the Central Bay. This time I'm trying to show you general areas where you can look around for yourselves and find the fish. I'll be doing the same again in the next video in a little bit more detail. If you'd like to see more of my videos, you can go to my YouTube channel. There's a link to the entire playlist for this series in the description below. Don't forget to click that like button, comment and subscribe for more. Until next time, good fishing.